Welcome to another episode of All About Art. If you're new here, All About Art is a podcast with the mission of demystifying the professional art sector by publishing interviews with people working in the arts as they talk about their education, career paths, and more, spotlighting the cultural sector as a really great place to work. I also produce solo episodes where I talk about different topics in the art world from the point of view of someone who works in it. Right now, full-length interviews of All About Art are audio only, but depending on where you are tuning in, you can either watch the solo episodes or just listen in. Before we continue, if you tune into this episode and you enjoy it, help us out by hitting the thumbs up or rating the podcast over on the streaming site of your choice, as it helps us continue to produce the show. Before we begin today, I want to sit with a question together, one that isn't meant to be provocative for the sake of it, but genuinely revealing. I'm asking the question, why does the art world resist technology? We often describe the arts as a space of experimentation, of pushing boundaries, of imagining what doesn't yet exist because we're all creative thinkers who approach life in different ways. Yet, when it comes to the everyday mechanics of how the industry actually runs, from gallery operations to artist support systems, we default to habits and workflows that haven't actually meaningfully changed in decades. Look, I love the idea of writing a curatorial text as much as the next person, but we all also need to do our taxes and keep spreadsheets of art sales and more of these important business practices. We romanticize the analog to the point where inefficiency becomes cultural value rather than a practical limitation. We equate friction with authenticity, and we treat technological adoption as a threat to identity rather than a tool for sustainability. So today's hot take art break centers on a straightforward argument. The arts is a tech-phobic industry, and it makes us fall behind. This is not a claim that technology is inherently good. It's not an argument that art should be optimized, automated, or flattened. In no way am I saying that. It's simply a recognition that the operational stagnation within the arts has real consequences for everyone inside it. Artists, interns, gallerists, educators, and audiences alike. This conversation surfaced when I was speaking with Callum Hale-Thompson, founder of First Thursday, on a previous episode of All About Art. We ended up on the topic of what gallery internships tend to look like in practice, and I was speaking about my own experiences. Instead of being shaped as learning environments that introduce, for example, the complexities of representation, curatorial development, collection building, or artist care, internships in many commercial galleries become an accumulation of administrative tasks. Not just some administrative work, entirely administrative work, ranging from running errands, which, yes, is definitely part of being an intern, but also to decoding handwritten contact details from random address books and Googling images for face charts for the directors, and missing a huge chunk of valuable learning in the process, because even the directors are bogged down with administrative tasks like spreadsheets and emails and don't always have the capacity to teach new staff. The work experience becomes a repetition of searching for images in poorly organized folders, inputting collector names into spreadsheets, resizing JPEGs for databases whose logic is unclear, and compiling headshots so directors can identify VIP visitors. None of this is unethical, and I'm very aware that administrative labor is unavoidable in any sector and in any job. But in other industries, from anecdotes that I hear from friends in other sectors, they most definitely use the tools at their disposal to their advantage. Not to de-skill, which is often the fear with technology, but instead to take care of the mundane tasks and allow for more space to learn more from the start. What emerges from this is not skill development, but an internalization of the idea that struggling through disorganization is simply how one proves commitment. I bet that everyone who has worked in a gallery will be nodding their heads in agreement right now. We substitute education for efficiency, and the tragedy of that is that we pause talent, fresh eyes that could be participating in research, audience engagement, sales strategies, exhibition interpretation, institutional critique. Instead, the time is swallowed by processes that could be supported with the most basic technological integration. It's too simple to say that the art world doesn't use technology because it's unaware of it. The resistance is cultural rather than technical. There is a deeply ingrained belief that everyone must earn their place, and earning one's place is often described as enduring the tedious. Many decision makers experienced those structures themselves and passed them on without questioning whether the structure served them or hardened them. Let's address the elephant in the room when we talk about art and tech. There's also a reputational hangover from the NFT and crypto era. For many in the traditional art world, me included, the introduction of blockchain technologies became synonymous with speculation, financial hype cycles, and, dare I say, cultural cringe. So even when we talk about technologies that have nothing to do with NFTs, such as digital asset management, automated outreach, or standardized copyright tracking, the emotional association is already negative. And beneath both of these, there is a quieter fear, and one that I'm almost nervous to touch on if I'm honest. Technology distributes knowledge. If records are centralized, if collector relationships are tracked in transparent systems, if pricing histories become visible, more visible than they are, then power shifts. Much of the art world functions through interpersonal exclusivity, knowing who to call. Technology threatens to flatten these hierarchies, which sometimes are also important for discretion and respect, which I fully acknowledge as well. It is a tough line to walk here, but I guess these systems are threatened anyway when businesses get hacked and client information gets released, which has happened in some places in recent years. But let's not dwell on that too much. Because the art world avoids systemic updates, the effects ripple. Small and mid-sized galleries often operate at the edge of capacity, which makes thoughtful strategic development nearly impossible. Institutions rely heavily on individual staff members whose personal memory functions as the archive, meaning that when they leave, knowledge disappears with them. Artists are expected to navigate intellectual property, audience building, and professionalization largely alone, often with any standardized tools to protect their work or their labor. Meanwhile, the global art economy leans increasingly on art fairs as primary sites of sale. There are now hundreds of fairs each year. Like we discussed in a previous episode of All About Art on the relatively new art fair Minor Attractions. For most other fairs, participation is expensive, and entry requires financial stability that smaller galleries don't really possess, meaning access to visibility becomes dependent on funding rather than curatorial value. Technology could and has mitigated this to some degree through online viewing rooms, collector intelligence platforms, and other decentralized exhibition formats. But those tools can only function if the internal operations behind them are stable. And at the moment, they aren't. It's important to separate two different conversations that are often mistakenly collapsed together. There is technology in the creation of art, such as AI generative tools, digital rendering, and procedural systems, which I actually wrote about for my undergrad dissertation in history of art. And I will forever love the works by Sogwen Chung, for example. But on the other hand, there is technology in the administration of the art world, such as digital archives, CRM relationship systems, licensing databases, and automated communications. The first concerns aesthetics and authorship. The second concerns daily operations, and in some cases, daily survival. These tools don't replace artistic interpretation, curatorial judgment, or human connection. They simply remove the layers of preventable labor that currently smother the people who are meant to be thinking, researching, responding, and imagining. This isn't about making the art world efficient, it's about making it livable. There's also great debate to the use of technology for art production solely, but that's a whole separate can of worms. The meaningful shift is not dramatic. It starts with the question, what tasks currently consuming human energy could be systemized in a way that preserves human expertise rather than replacing it? Interns could spend less time formatting images and more time discussing exhibition themes and learning from the experienced members of staff. Intellectual property could be tracked and licensed through structured frameworks rather than improvise on a per-case basis. Collectors could be engaged in deliberate long-term relationship building rather than periodic bursts of urgent outreach driven by stress in an exhausted post-art fair burst rather than intentional regular check-ins. And I'm sure many more that people, including surely you listening in, have the knowledge and passion to recognize. Using tech is not abandoning the humanity of the sector we love. It simply asks that we stop treating exhaustion or tradition as a prerequisite for belonging in it. So when we say the art world is tech-phobic, we aren't talking about artists or necessarily individuals. Artists adopt new tools constantly. The resistance lies in the infrastructure, in the systems that shape access, labor, and value. And that cost of resistance is high. It narrows who can afford to work in the field. It burns out the people who stay, and it slows our ability to respond to the world we claim to reflect. The caveat here is that I'm not saying that the use of AI-generated content is not a danger to society, because it is. And I should say that as a very clear disclaimer, but that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about using technology to free up thinking space and take a heavy administrative load off of arts workers. Using technology intentionally and responsibly is not a threat to the arts. The refusal to adapt, especially in a current climate of less staff and more work, is. And that's it for today on All About Art. As always, thank you so much for listening.